After all, how often should men over 60 train to achieve maximum muscle growth? This is what the 5% who actually manage to build muscle at this age do differently. A 2023 study in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research followed two groups of men over 60 for 20 weeks. Same exercises, same diet, same sleep. The only difference was training frequency. The result was surprising. The group that trained each muscle twice a week built 47% more muscle mass. Not 10, not 20% more, 47%. The same effort, distributed differently. But frequency is just one of the variables men over 60 are getting wrong without knowing it. There are other factors, hormonal, neurological, and mechanical, working against your results every week no matter how dedicated you are. That is why today you will see each of the variables that impact muscle development after 60 and what the few who actually achieve significant results at this age are doing differently. This is not one of those videos that will tell you that you need to sleep better, eat more protein, or take creatine. This is information that I bet 99% of people watching right now truly do not know. Before we begin, please tell us in the comments your name and the city you are watching from. We would love to know. Number 1. The muscle after 60 responds better to more frequent stimulation and less volume per session. The natural tendency of those who have trained for years is to concentrate everything into one long, intense session, believing that the more volume at once, the better the result. For men over 60, this logic works directly against biology. A meta-analysis published in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research in 2019, which analyzed 25 studies with men over 55, concluded that distributing the same weekly volume across more short sessions produced 34% more muscle gain than concentrating it into long, spread-out sessions. The reason is physiological. The aged muscle can process a lower ceiling of stimulus per session before entering unproductive fatigue, but it responds very well to smaller stimuli repeated more frequently throughout the week. It is the difference between watering a plant with a full bucket once a week or with a glass every day. The total volume of water may be the same, but the plant that receives water daily grows much healthier. For men over 60, sessions of 45 to 55 minutes with well-selected exercises, repeated at the appropriate frequency, consistently outperform 90-minute sessions performed twice a week. This also means you do not need to spend hours at the gym to achieve significant results. Number 2. Rest time between sets is longer than you imagine. Most men over 60 rest between 60 and 90 seconds between sets. As they learned decades ago from bodybuilding magazines or some personal trainer, this interval may work reasonably for young men, but for those over 60, it is systematically too short and is sabotaging the quality of every subsequent set. The aged muscle, combined with a central nervous system that already operates with a slower recovery speed, needs more time to replenish high-energy phosphates, which are the immediate fuel for intense muscular contraction. Rest periods of 2 to 3 minutes between heavy sets allow the neuromuscular system to recover almost completely, ensuring that the second, third, and fourth sets are performed with the same quality of movement and load as the first. When the rest is too short, what feels like intensity is actually a progressive degradation of effort quality. You do more sets, but each one is worth less and less. The final result is less real muscular stimulus, not more. Can you imagine the impact of this accumulated over months of training? There is also the hormonal aspect that many people ignore. Longer rest periods between heavy sets favor a more favorable hormonal environment for hypertrophy, allowing the peaks of testosterone and growth hormone generated by the effort to effectively translate into anabolic signaling. Number 3. Never underestimate deload time. Deload is one of the most powerful tools available to men over 60 and, at the same time, the most ignored. Most avoid it out of fear of losing momentum or because they feel that a lighter week is a sign of weakness or laziness. This misconception costs months of real progress. A study published in the European Journal of Applied Physiology followed men over 60 in two groups for 24 weeks. One trained continuously without interruption, and the other inserted a week of reduced volume every 6 weeks. At the end, the group that deloaded regularly showed 28% more total muscle gain than the group that trained non-stop. The mechanism is straightforward. It is during the deload that the central nervous system recovers from accumulated fatigue, that the joints resolve silent micro-inflammations, and that the body effectively consolidates the adaptations built in the previous weeks. Training without deloading is like pressing the accelerator without ever stopping to refuel. The feeling is of movement, but the destination gets further and further away. The deload does not need to be a week completely away from the gym. It can be a week with loads reduced by 40 to 50%, with the same number of sets and reps, but with noticeably less effort. The goal is not to test the body's limits, but to allow it to process and consolidate everything that has been built. For men over 60, progress does not only happen during training, it happens mainly during the recovery you allow between sessions. Those who resist the deload out of pride are in practice, working more and growing less. Number 4, the eccentric phase is worth more than the total weight. When most men think about progress in training, they think about lifting more weight, but there is a half of every repetition that is consistently wasted, and that for men over 60 represents one of the greatest unexplored opportunities for muscle growth. The eccentric phase is the moment when the muscle lengthens under load, lowering the dumbbell in a bicep curl, descending in a squat, lowering the bar in the bench press. This movement generates a type of deep mechanical tension in the muscle tissue that the concentric phase, the effort of lifting, simply cannot replicate to the same magnitude. Research in exercise physiology shows that the eccentric phase can generate up to 40% more controlled muscle microdamage than the lifting phase with the same load. And it is precisely this microdamage that signals the body to rebuild the muscle stronger and thicker. For men over 60, lowering the weight over 3 to 4 seconds in an intentional and controlled manner, instead of letting it fall by gravity, transforms each repetition into a much more powerful hypertrophy tool. What many people do not know is that the muscle can tolerate approximately 20 to 30% greater loads in the eccentric phase than in the concentric phase. This means you can obtain high-intensity stimulus without needing to carry the maximum weight on the way up, which significantly reduces the risk of joint injuries, a huge benefit for those over 60. Most men are wasting half of every set without even noticing, and correcting this costs nothing beyond attention and intention. Number 5, training to failure frequently is a serious mistake after 60. The culture of going until you cannot anymore is one of the most harmful legacies of traditional bodybuilding for men over 60. Training to absolute muscular failure seems synonymous with maximum commitment, but the physiological cost of this habit at this age group is disproportionate to the benefit obtained. A study published in the Journal of Sports Sciences in 2020 compared two groups of men over 60 training with identical volumes. One group took every set to failure, and the other systematically stopped 2 to 3 repetitions short. After 12 weeks, the muscle gains were practically identical between the groups, but the group that trained to failure showed significantly higher post-workout cortisol levels, greater recovery time needed between sessions, and a higher incidence of joint pain. The technique known as RIR, which stands for reps in reserve, produces the same anabolic stimulus with a fraction of the hormonal and joint cost. In practice, this means executing each set with maximum quality, but ending it when you would still be capable of completing 2 or 3 more repetitions with a good technique. The practical result is that you can train more frequently, maintain movement quality throughout the entire session, and preserve the joints for the long term. Training to failure occasionally may have its role, but as a regular strategy after 60, the cost simply does not pay off. Before we continue, do not forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell. Having constant access to science-based information is what will make you progress with health over the long term in the world of exercise. Number 6, the central nervous system ages faster than the muscle. There is a variable in training after 60 that almost no coach mentions, and that explains why so many men feel reasonably well the day after training, but accumulate invisible fatigue over the weeks until performance drops without an apparent cause. The central nervous system ages faster than the muscle tissue itself. While the muscle aches and clearly signals when it needs rest, the central nervous system degrades silently without perceptible pain, but with direct consequences on performance, coordination, and muscle recruitment. After 60, the central nervous system is the first to enter fatigue during an intense session, and when it is overloaded, the muscle is never fully recruited. No matter how hard you try try to push. Think of the central nervous system as the conductor of an orchestra. When rested, all the musicians play in sync, and the result is impressive. When exhausted, even the best instrumentalists sound out of tune. This means that very long or very frequent workouts may feel productive in the immediate sensation, but in practice, they are degrading the nervous system's capacity to send the maximum contraction signal necessary for real growth. Sessions of no more than 55 minutes with well-chosen exercises and adequate rest between sets preserve the central nervous system and ensure that each repetition is of high neurological quality. Because it is there, in the quality of the signal that the nervous system sends to the muscle, that real muscle growth begins. And this point connects directly with what you will see now. Number 7. The order of exercises impacts anabolic hormones. The sequence in which you perform exercises within a session is not a logistical detail. It is a hormonal decision with direct impact on how much muscle mass you will build. A study published in the Journal of Human Kinetics demonstrated that men over 60 who started training with large muscle groups and compound movements such as squats, deadlifts, bench press, and rows showed significantly higher acute peaks of testosterone and growth hormone than those who started with isolation exercises. This hormonal peak generated by the large movements at the beginning of the session is not restricted to the muscles trained at that moment. It positively contaminates the entire subsequent session, enhancing the anabolic response of the smaller exercises that come after. Men who do the opposite, starting with bicep curls, leg extensions, or lateral raises, lose this cascade effect and reduce the hormonal environment of the entire session, even before reaching the most important movements. For men over 60, where testosterone peaks are already naturally lower than in previous decades, wasting this mechanism is too high a cost. The practical solution is simple. Always start with compound movements that recruit the most muscle mass simultaneously, regardless of the muscle you want to emphasize that day. Isolation exercises have their place, but that place is at the end of the session, where they enhance what has already been built by the hormonal effect of the larger movements, and not at the beginning, where they only waste the most favorable anabolic environment of the workout. And speaking of progression, the next point will completely change the way you think about it. Number 8. Load progression is not the only form of progression, and may be the least important after 60. The obsession with adding weight to the bar every week is understandable. For years it was the main indicator of progress in training, and for young people in the initial phase of neural adaptation, it works very well. But for men over 60, this isolated metric becomes increasingly limited and is frequently the direct cause of injuries that interrupt months of consistent work. The body at this age has already reached much of its potential for neural adaptation to brute load, and insisting on pushing this limit week after week without exploring other forms of progression is to ignore equally effective and far more sustainable tools. Improving the quality of the mind-muscle connection, which is the ability to deliberately and with maximum intensity contract the target muscle in each repetition, is a form of progression with a direct impact on hypertrophy. Increasing range of motion, adding a repetition per set, gradually reducing rest time, or refining control of the eccentric phase are forms of progression that the muscle over 60 responds to very well. And do you know why this is so important? Because these forms of progression generate increasing stimulus without the joint and neurological cost of constantly increasing load. A man who genuinely improves the quality of muscular contraction in each repetition is progressing in a real way, even if the weight on the bar is exactly the same as the previous week. Real progress is not measured only by what is written on the plate. It is measured by the quality of the stimulus delivered to the muscle in every session. And this is a distinction that separates those who build results from those who only accumulate injuries. Number 9. The testosterone to cortisol ratio, the hormonal variable that governs your training days. Each training session triggers two simultaneous and opposing hormonal processes within the body. The first is anabolic, acute peaks of testosterone and growth hormone that signal the muscle to rebuild stronger. The second is catabolic, elevation of cortisol, the stress hormone, which manages the energetic and inflammatory demand of physical effort. In a well-recovered man, the anabolic response dominates and cortisol resolves within 24 to 36 hours. But in a man who trains with excessive frequency or volume without adequate recovery, cortisol does not return to baseline before the next session. It accumulates, the ratio inverts, and the internal environment becomes predominantly catabolic. A study from the Journal of Hormones and Behavior followed men over 60 60 in 3 different frequency protocols for 8 weeks and found that those who trained 4 days per week with adequate recovery maintained the highest testosterone to cortisol ratio throughout the entire period. Those who trained 6 days per week entered a catabolic hormonal state from the 4th week onward. This means the body was actively degrading muscle tissue despite all the effort invested in training. More training, less muscle. This is one of the most cruel paradoxes that exist for men over 60 who dedicate themselves sincerely but do not understand what is happening at the hormonal level. Monitoring signs such as persistent irritability, declining sleep quality, fatigue that does not pass with 1 day of rest, and stagnation or decline in performance is the most practical way to identify when this ratio is unfavorable and when the body needs recovery before more training. And the last point on this list is one of the most underestimated and at the same time, one of the ones that most silently blocks progress. Number 10. Weakened stabilizer muscles sabotage the growth of primary muscles. There is a category of muscle that no one sees in the mirror, that rarely appears in traditional training programs, and that, when weak, acts as an invisible brake on the growth of all the muscles you are actually trying to develop. The deep stabilizing muscles such as the rotator cuff in the shoulders, the gluteus medius in the hip, and the spinal erectors in the lower back weaken and atrophy with aging before the superficial muscles do. And the central nervous system perceives this immediately. As a protective mechanism, the body unconsciously limits the force and load it allows in primary movements to prevent the joint from being overloaded beyond what the stabilizers can support. The practical result is a man who cannot progress in the bench press for months, not because the chest is the problem, but because the rotator cuff is too weak to allow the system to work at full capacity. Or a man who stagnates in the squat because of insufficient gluteus medius, not due to lack of leg strength. Dedicating specific stabilizer work 1 or 2 times per week unlocks a progression that seemed to have reached its limit. Movements such as external shoulder rotation with a resistance band, standing hip abduction, and deep core activation exercises are not optional accessories for men over 60. They are the foundation that determines how much you can grow in the primary exercises. Ignoring the stabilizers while focusing only on the visible muscles is working against yourself without realizing it, and correcting this is often the change that unlocks months of stalled progress. If you enjoyed this and want to discover some other hacks that simply force your body to gain muscle mass at any age, we have a video appearing on screen right now showing each of them in more detail. Make sure to check it out. Thank you for watching all the way through, and may God bless you, my friend.